I would like to now introduce our esteemed moderator, Peter Whibley. Peter works at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and his CV is very impressive, and I've just pulled out a few interesting tidbits. As you probably remember from yesterday, he is the director at Center ICE, which is the university's arm focused on intellectual property, commercialization, that type of thing. He's a research professor, 15 years as a geoscientist and a remote sensing scientist, and he has a passion for business development and tech transfer. He's also the deputy director of the UAF Tech Transfer Office, and he also does stuff with the Alaska Center for Unmanned Aircraft. I say stuff, leadership things. And he's just a delight to work with. He's been an integral part of our content team, so everything you're experiencing today, Peter had a piece of that. And so I'm going to let him come, or you could stay there, and allow our guests to introduce themselves, perhaps. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Good, we're live. Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's enjoyed our presentation so far. So today we're going to have a panel discussion. I've provided the group a few questions so we can have a chat about certain topics related to challenges, opportunities for building the infrastructure to implement AI capabilities, AI technologies in Alaska, so Alaska can stay ahead. But what are the challenges to stay ahead where we can become a leader, and what are some examples of ways these tools are being used and can be used? So I've been in Alaska nearly 20 years, came over as a postdoctoral researcher, but I've also started a business from my university research. So I have the business side of doing small business grants, and also doing sort of federally funded research and training around innovation. So that our topic is going to talk about competitiveness, challenges, where this panel see we could become a lead, and what do we think are some of the priorities that we as the state could be doing to support us all to be able to implement these tools for those wanting to use them, and how we can become a leader where others can come to us as a state for some of these technology opportunities. So I'm going to let the three esteemed panelists sitting here with me introduce themselves. We're always best to talk about our backgrounds. So I'll pass over to Neil, sat here to my left, and then go across to Steve and to Leonard. So Neil, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think Bill Smith already gave me a little bit of an introduction. Born and raised in Alaska, deputy CIO for the state of Alaska for the last 5 years, and point on cloud migration and AI adoption inside the state.
Steve Brown, you met me yesterday. I spent 20, 30 years maybe in business thinking about how to help companies, when I was working at Intel, how to help companies go through digital transformation, create value, create new products and services. So my mindset is always helping companies to do more and better. So that's me.
Leonard Robertson. I see myself as fairly new to Alaska. I moved here in 1990. Spent majority of that time actually here in Juneau until recently. I've worked up through the state of Alaska through different roles, from direct IT up through to joining governor's policy team, and then at this time I work with Ada on a development of technology portfolio and ideas and technology across Alaska based upon Alaska's rich resources. But in a summary, what I like to think of myself as a geek interpreter. Because all of this is extremely exciting, and I've known Neil for a while, and we both get really excited about the opportunity that are coming and all this type of, I'm just going to say, embracing the geekiness of this.
Great. So as you can see, the panel comes from a number of different groups and brings different expertise to this discussion. So I guess the first question is, I'll go to Neil, we heard Bill talking a little bit about data security and data safety in terms of information. What do you, yourself, or the organization you represent see as some of the infrastructure gaps we have in Alaska to implement some of these technologies into agencies, whether they be federal, state, or university, or private sector?
Yeah, I think the first thing I'm going to lead off with is if we're going to adopt AI, we need to demystify it. There's so much hype, there's so much promise, and there's so much discussion about it. I noticed that as the state works towards implementing it, we have to demystify it. And so what I need everyone in this room from this day forward is that anytime someone says AI, you need to ask in your mind, which one? There are different categories. There are different levels of effort to be able to get into the different AIs. It is not a singular. So when you say, what are the infrastructure limitations that we have to get into AI, I'm going to say which AI, and I'll go ahead and answer that myself, but thank you. So there are different types of AI. There's the consumer AI, the desktop AI, the app that you install. You just go to a website and ask it a question. That's the consumer AI. That's the desktop AI. That level of effort, you don't need infrastructure. You just need to install the software on your phone or on your desktop, and now you actually have access to that different AI. You integrate it with your software suite, whether it be the Google software suite or the Microsoft software suite or any other standalone suite that's actually out there. So that, I don't think any infrastructure is necessarily needed other than connectivity so that we can get to the internet, and because that's where all the compute and things like that go. Okay, fair, that one does require connectivity. I always joke that bandwidth can buy happiness. So there's that one. The other categories is the professional and the developer categories there. The professional, as Bill had mentioned, you don't necessarily need to be an IT professional, but you do need to know your data. You're a scientist, you're an accountant, you're somebody like that. There's tools out there that you can take and you point at your data and you work with them. So there's a certain level of technology there that you can't just approach and do, but you kind of need to know about it. And then there's the developer AI, which you need to have skills, developer-type skills there. So again, I don't think of maybe necessarily infrastructure that you need to be able to deploy some of those or take advantage of some of those. Those are already existing in a cloud location. So again, access to it. The gaps that I see for us being able to take advantage of those technologies is a lot around training, as far as how do I take this tool and point it at my data and let me ask it questions. So there is a training or an education aspect associated with that, and you have to grow your own. In many cases, if we have to grow our own, we have to get a partner that's actually someone that actually helps us actually do that. So that's going to be kind of a partner solution that will actually help us take advantage of that particular AI. And then finally, there is that niche piece, that niche AI where you build it all yourself. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. As far as, from the ground up, you have to do all your own training and your grounding and all that other stuff. Yes, that we see that coming in the future. It's so far out, but for that, if the state of Alaska is going to get involved with building your own AI, then yes, we need the connectivity, we need the edge clouding, the hardware, and things like that. That probably makes the most sense to actually work with a partner who's already doing it, and how do we invite them into the state to be able to do it, maybe take advantage of cooling in Alaska or something like that.
Yeah, thanks for that. I also, from my background in the autonomous vehicle world and the drone world, unmanned aircraft systems, if someone comes to us and said, hey, I want to use a drone, it's like, well, what are you using it for? What's your challenge? And the same, because then we can say, well, do you need a hexacopter system, which you can purchase with a credit card at Costco, or do you need a runway-specific 6-hour flight operations that can map half of the North Slope? Because it's what's the application and what's your challenge and what's your need. And I think, as you very well explained, it's the same thing with these tools, is what are you looking to implement? What's your challenge you have today where they could improve your process efficiency or your data analysts, and then you can determine what's the right tool for the job.
If we're going to make it work for us, we have to get past, we have to be able to articulate what it is. We have to stop treating it as a singular. Right. They should have called it AIs. They put an S on it or something like that. Probably a big disservice by just not putting an S on it.
And also, I think of AI, we heard about the other representations of acronyms. I also think it can be used as actionable intelligence as well. Another way to think about it. So I'll come to Steve as the futurist in a second. But Leonard, in terms of sort of the opportunities for Alaska in the full spectrum of the examples that Neil gave, where do you think are some of the opportunities for Alaska as a state to grow and be providers of capabilities that others can come and use? such that not only can we be users of these tools, but become leaders where others can access our capabilities, our talent, to be able to grow an economy around this in Alaska, not just as an application, but as a developer?
I think it would be really important to step back for a moment, as Neil was classifying the different types of AI, is also to look at AI as actually a state of technology, in that we're still dealing with the same underlying paths of technology and development. One is the society and how we use these different innovations. And so, but I'm also going to appeal to you on the fact, because you're part of the Ikwasi program, this is a really prime example of the Ikwasi program has been working through autonomous transportation. And typically people might be thinking of drones, but we're also talking about ground transportation, sea transportation. And transportation is not just the ability for you to transport a package by your service provider to your house and make your life easy. And a lot of innovation was taking place in autonomous transportation or in out of line of sight type flight with these drones or with these vehicles. But the rapid expansion of AI recently and how quickly it's growing is resulting in an explosion in the transportation industry, not just in the vehicles, but in the ability for us to start remapping how people will move around the world, how flights will begin to adapt to the human process versus the business process of what is it that you take, what is it that a person is looking for as they're going to, when you're wanting to go to Europe, you're at the will of the transportation industry. AI will allow the transportation industry to begin to adapt to the will of the people. It's a very inspiring thing for me. But when we look at how we're just changing transportation, now we're also changing of what we see as a field. And I think the biggest resource that we have in Alaska is people. And we also are looking for, across Alaska, economic diversity for these people. And so typically when we think about the service industries or we think about construction industries, we think of it as operators of machinery. But all of these industries in air transportation, in machinery transportation, they're going to become AI operators. They're going to be operating these machines from remote locations. They're going to be working on this. And so I think one of the things that we're going to find exciting is that schools like in Alaska that we have at AvTech and the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and me being from the University of Alaska Southeast, is that we're going to see a change in how we look at the IT worker and the construction worker, because they're going to become the same person. And the transportation worker that might be working in the airline, that's one of the biggest ones. I think the workforce is going to be the biggest transformation that we see in resources. Alaska is one of the most resource-rich states, if not the, when we look at what's in the ground. But what we also have is a workforce that is typically in remote communities that is looking for economic diversity. And the connection of broadband is now giving a workforce of where you might have an 8-year-old sitting somewhere in Alaska that typically the idea that they might be a part of this amazing technology was not something they could, but broadband brings that to them. We're going to bring a workforce to the world that's ready to start. And because it's domestic, it also helps us to meet a lot of our concerns about international workforce. So I think that this is some of the biggest, I think it's the workforce is where I see our biggest innovation, and I really appreciate what Ikwasi's been doing in this. And then just a shout out to them is that if you don't know it, Alaska is the largest research area in the nation as approved by the FAA, and it's another place of innovation I think everyone should look up after this. Just fabulous work that you guys are doing.
And thank you, and I didn't prime Leonard to say that, so I appreciate that. So Steve, as having heard over the last day or so presentations, you've hopefully gone to some of the innovation shorts and sort of somebody looking to the future, but also seeing Alaska potentially in person for the first time, but also what's going on. And you spoke about your waves of what's coming. You always want to think about how can we be prepared. You always look to what's coming so you can be developing it so you are at the top of the wave when the wave turns up. And I always think about what can we be doing in Alaska to build the surfboards to ride the waves when they get here. And as a futurist, sort of what do you think Alaska could be doing as a state, whether it be federal, private, academia, to be ready to be a leader in those future waves that you highlighted on the right-hand side of that slide? So that's my question to you. And obviously, Leonard and Neil, after Steve's given his thoughts, maybe you can think about from within the state, what are some of the ways that we could build ourselves to not just be working with the existing tools and therefore become users, but become that leader as the next AI development comes that Steve highlighted. So I'm an academic, I could fill the time, so I'm going to pass it over to Steve as I ask the question of him. What do we see that Alaska could be doing to be ready to ride those waves and build the surfboards?
That was a very long question. Thank you.
As I said, I'm an academic. I can give you a long question.
So
But I did summarize it at the end to remind you of what I asked.
I won't give you a long answer. So things you can do. Invest in your talent. Make sure, you heard from Kate yesterday. It's about AI literacy. Make sure that every Alaskan knows what AI is. I was checking out of the hotel about an hour and a half ago, and the woman at the desk said to me, "Oh, what brought you to Juneau?" "Oh, I was speaking." "Oh, what are you talking about?" "AI." "Oh, what's that?" "Oh, it's artificial intelligence." "What's that?" And her colleague piped up, "Oh, it's IT, it's in your phone." And that was their understanding of AI. One had never heard the term before, the other one had a very basic understanding of what it was, which probably wasn't accurate. So there's a lot of work still to be done so that every Alaskan knows what AI is, they know its potential, and they know how to wring the most out of it. So there's a huge education effort ahead. And then I think rethinking every part of everything that you do. How do you do education in Alaska? What's the role that AI should play in the classroom and outside the classroom to boost educational outcomes? What's the role that AI should play in healthcare? Especially if you're in a remote location, having a doctor in your pocket will be an amazing asset. Having a tutor in your pocket to teach you anything that you want to learn will be an amazing asset. So learning how to use AI, I think there's an infrastructure piece. Great that you have broadband. I've been using 5G while I was in Juneau. It's like dial-up. I'm not kidding. I did a speed test on it. It's 0.07 megabits a second. I get 250 back in Portland. So you're multiple orders of magnitude off. And that may be just my provider, but the giggles in the audience says this is a common experience. So there's still a long way to go. Push your telecom providers to do better for Alaskans. And then finally, think about your businesses today. I tried to give you a guide yesterday on what's coming. And do you remember I showed you a slide that had a business process, and you break it down into tasks, and then figure which is best done by a human, which is best done by an AI, and so on? I would encourage people in Alaska to start doing that work now, so that when these waves crash on shore, you already know what you're going to do, where you're going to put the AI to work. You've already thought about it. So you're not getting to the point where, oh, AI is here now, what should we do? You already know exactly how you're going to do it. So those would be 3 things I would recommend.
Great, thanks, Steve. So Neil and Leonard, as those in Alaska and in organizations, what do you see as some of the things that we could do as a state to become that prepared leader, and we're not just a user of some of these different iterations of the AI that you spoke about, Neil? So Neil, Leonard, what do you think are some of the ways that we could become those surfboard leaders? And I know I'm using something up. Maybe I should say become the snow machine leaders or the snowmobile leaders rather than the surfboards, because that's something you think of in Hawaii and other states, not as much in Alaska. So
I'm going to say stay current on the current technology. I know there's a lot of concern in the state of Alaska about putting services in the cloud, and we like them local. And I understand maybe the logic or the arguments behind that. One of the things that I've also learned is that if you stay current on your technology, then when new technology comes out, you're only one step away. As Bill had pointed out, we did a cloud migration and we did a modernization of our security tools. And now that we did that, there's no way we saw AI coming, not any more than anybody else did. But we did the modern thing. We modernized. We put our servers and our data in the cloud. So that's called proximity. We did that, and now when the AI came, now it's like, oh, it's already right there. Now we could take advantage of it. Now we can leverage it. So you don't have to be on the bleeding edge, but certainly the leading edge. You position yourself to be able to adapt more quickly. Whereas, if you're now somebody who's still on premise and now the tools are in the cloud, now you have to migrate to the cloud and then be able to adopt the AI. Now you're 2 steps away. And then when the next thing comes, and those, like you said, those waves, back to your metaphor, those waves are going to keep coming more and more quickly. Now if you're, all of a sudden, if you stall for another 6 months or another year, now you're going to be 3 steps away from now I have to migrate and adopt and then modernize.
Great, thanks for that. Leonard, from your perspective.
I have just one question for the audience, is how much of the audience here works in government? Okay, so for those of you that work in government, how much of a crisis would it be if we walked in and we suddenly said to all of your people, stop what you're doing, start thinking different? And that's one of the things I think that we do need to prepare. So we need to step back and realize what we've been doing and how we've been doing it. We have an opportunity to do so much that's different. And one of the big places that we could work and be ready to do is to step back and look at Alaska differently. Down south looks at us as we're sitting up in the corner. It's that place. It's a great vacation destination. And when you look at what is the opportunity in Alaska is that, well, we have renewable energy. We have a workforce, and we're open for innovation. But the other thing is that when you talk about broadband, yes, as you go faster and faster, it's like a drug. You'll never want to go back. So you're here right now, you're going through withdrawals, we really feel for you.
Don't go to the village.
Yeah, but what if you take and you look at Alaska differently, instead of it being this satellite to the rest of the country, where you go and it's, one, shipping here in Juneau especially, I mean, let's not get started on that, being treated like sending UPS off into outer space, right? But if you take Alaska and you turn it on the map and you put it in the middle of your map, you start to realize why Ted Stevens is one of the most busy airports in the world, if not at times the busiest airport. Alaska is the center of transportation. And when it comes down to broadband, that's milliseconds, that's transportation of data. So when you look at what does it take for a data center to be built, what does it take to become an economic hub in data, it comes energy, and we have renewable energy. We do. We have it stranded, but that's something to watch and be prepared. How do we start bringing all of our renewable energy to market? And the next one is realizing that the speed potential between Anchorage or almost anywhere in Alaska is at about 20 to 30% potential less than Seattle or LA. Because when you put Alaska at the top of the map, you start to realize we are the hub of Europe, Asia, and the United States. So start rethinking what you think of Alaska is that we're not the satellite of the country. Everyone is focused around us. That, I think, is the biggest thing for us, is start rethinking how we look at Alaska and what our potential for the market is.
The other advantage you have here is it's cold. Right? If you're 40% of the energy consumption of a data center is cooling it. So being in a cooler climate is actually advantageous when you're building massive data centers. And an AI data center is much denser in terms of computational capability and heat, which is why they're often liquid cooled now, than a traditional data center. So cooling's a big deal. Build data centers in a cold place is a good idea. You can only do that, though, if you have great connectivity. And when I look at the submarine fiber map, you don't have high-speed submarine fiber coming to Alaska. If you could fix that, you could really make this a central hub for the world, to your point. And I think that's a big thing that's missing, because you currently have to go down to Seattle on a cable before you can go out to the world. So that's something to think about. It's a very expensive undertaking, though.
It is a very expensive undertaking, and I think it comes back to, in my mind, we've spoken about my background in Aquasi, but my current main role is this interim director of the Innovation, Commercialization, Entrepreneurship Program. And we know in Alaska that a lot of the population businesses are small businesses, less than 500 employees. We've got companies that are moving into the startup space, the scalable companies. So if we rotate that map and put Alaska as a focal point for this, where are the growth areas then? Let's say we do the investment and that system comes in place that Steve spoke about. So then what could Alaskan businesses focus on to become growth components of these new sectors? So maybe those are areas where we could be innovating in preparation to become a scalable company around now that we know that there's been an investment and put in that cable. So we're hypothesizing that's in place. So, and then how do we retain individuals in Alaska to be able to build that out? So I guess maybe we'll start with Steve as the sort of futurist is, if we did have that in place, where could then companies grow into? What would be the areas that we should be thinking about to have a new company, to run innovation events, to run internal granting opportunities, to have people working on technologies? Where should we be investing our innovation dollars based on if we're able to get that connectivity set up?
Yeah, there's two areas I'd offer. The first one is humanoid robotics. You don't have to be a big company to be a leader. The company I showed you yesterday, Figure, that robotics company, currently has about 350 employees, and they're the world leader in humanoid robotics, and they're less than 3 years old. And they're going to be valued soon, well, they've just been valued at $34 billion. So it's doable. You just have to have the expertise and the will, and I guess the funding to get you started to do that. So humanoid robotics would be one big area. The other one is all the money at the moment in AI is being made by the infrastructure companies. So back in 1999, do you know who the most valuable company on the planet was? Any guesses? It was Cisco. Now, they're not the most valuable company on the planet anymore. Right, Cisco is the most valuable company because they were selling the picks and shovels as people were building out the internet, the routers and the switches and all the back-end equipment to make to build the internet, which is ultimately physical, the same way that AI is ultimately physical. So NVIDIA is making bank today. They just released their results yesterday. They were amazing. Stock price still went down bizarrely. But they are the second most valuable company on the planet behind Apple because they sell the picks and shovels to build AI. Now, do you think NVIDIA will be the most valuable company or the second most valuable company on the planet 10 or 20 years from now? No. So again, you look back to look forward. The people who will make money going forward are not the infrastructure folks, although they'll still be around, they'll still be profitable. It will be the people who build value on top of AI. The same way that Salesforce.com and all the big internet cloud companies, the SaaS companies, are making very good money now, building on the value that was created with the infrastructure of the internet. Once AI is built out, and infrastructure is not just the data centers, but it's the models that fit on top of that, so the foundational models, they'll all start to get commoditized. What's the value? What are the applications you'll build on top of that? So I think the real opportunity to make money for Alaska is to start thinking about what are the applications you would build on top of AI that you can then sell to the world.
Great, thanks for that. And then to sort of Neil and Leonard, on that sort of idea, have you got some use cases where you're seeing the existing tools being used effectively either in your organizations or people that you work with to highlight how groups are using the applications and maybe even some challenges you're seeing in the implementation of these different types of AI? Because then by looking at a challenge, you see an opportunity to build out a future value proposition for a new company or a new opportunity for Alaska. So do you have examples of cases where you're seeing them being used effectively or where people are struggling to implement them and there's an opportunity for something to be developed around those? So I guess it's a two question is, do you have use case examples where groups either in your organization or that you know of that have effectively implemented, and then examples where there's been challenges that could then be an opportunity for something developed locally?
Sure. Yeah, I agree that there's probably an economic opportunity for the infrastructure, but I think the bigger opportunity is all about the adoption of it. And so I'm going to put out there right now that like there's a lot of hype, and you're looking forward to the robots, and those are no doubt certainly going to be coming. The tools that are out there right now, as far as the generative AI or the interactive chatbot, those have been out there for over 2 years in secure, protected, responsible environments. And we are still struggling. People are still wrapping their minds around actually adopting them. So I see a huge opportunity as far as helping every business out here is like, how do I use AI to actually help me? Connecting that dot, that's kind of where my mind space is. As far as if you can't connect the dots between the AI that's available today and your business, yeah, I mean, let's not even talk about how are you going to connect the dots between your business needs and AI of the future. So one of the things that we notice, it's really difficult to hire really talented AI developers or programmers, because they're all getting sucked up by the companies that are paying a lot of money. We're in public sector, so we can't compete on that particular level. So we are finding we either need to grow them in-house, which is a huge opportunity for employees to be able to get that training, or we have to go to partners. And so those partners are the ones that are learning it. In many cases, we're learning with them, but they actually help us do that adoption. But that connection between your business need or your business pain point and the AI, I don't think that's ever going to go away. And there's a huge opportunity for us to come up with those local partners that can do that. We want to build that in-house because we're big enough. It's like, I would love to be able to go to a department and say, hey, what's your business need, and be able to tie that to here's the AI, and we can actually put these Lego building blocks together and be able to meet your particular need there. I think you asked for specific examples. Some of the ones that Bill had actually mentioned, and this is common across all state governments, is using AI to consume state government. How do I get to state services? What do I need? How do I demystify or clarify all these services in the state? Because quite honestly, residents, they can't tell the difference between the different departments. They can't even tell the difference between state and local government and federal government. They don't care. It's just government, and I need my services. How do I do that? So we need to recognize that and say, how do we actually make our services more consumable to the public? That's a really common interest. Put a chatbot, do prompts, figure out if I log in here once, I don't have to log in 3 or 4 more times all the way, around this, the different departments, et cetera. So sharing identities, and there's some security opportunities there. So definitely consuming state government is one, and then also internally is all the processing, all the forms, everything that's getting submitted. How do we process that? There's a huge interest in that, and we're piloting some of those.
Great, thank you for that. Leonard, over to you in terms of use cases that you know of where it's been effectively used, and if you've got any examples of where those that you work with or know of that are like struggling to see where it can be implementable and beneficial, where therefore there's an opportunity for support services, advice, whatever that might be. One of the
things that's very easy to get caught in is that when we're looking at AI, is that what we see at the desk is what most of us are seeing on day to day. And in the organization that I'm working with, we spend most of our time at a desk. So it's going to be really easy for me to start talking about the large language models and the generative AI, and that's where we're going to be for the moment, because that's what we're dealing with. But the entities that we work with also that we are starting to see improvements in are when they're processing large amounts of geodata, and they're able to use AI to start finding faster, quicker, and more accuracy in deposits using the existing technologies, but now artificial intelligence can process that a lot quicker, higher accuracy, still need human checking, still need verification, because AI is not just something you send out there and you don't, it's a workforce, and that's something we always need to remember is artificial intelligence is a set of computers that work for us. I just have to get that out there, is that always check the work of your workforce. But at the large language model, at the desk of where we can all see it, I love what I had heard a speaker a while back, so this is not my phrase, but AI helps to take the suck out of your job. It takes some of the monotonous, like when you have mountains of data that you need to process through, you've got 6 reports and you need to find comparables. Asking that large language model to put that into a framework and put that into where are my comparables, where are the conflicts between these documents? And that's where you go, wow, that helps a lot. I still got to check it. I still should go through all of that, but it helps me to quickly highlight those areas. And then when you need to send that off as a quick memo to your boss, double check that that memo is ready to go. That's where I'm seeing people starting to get gleeful and start to see what else is it going to help them in their job. That part. Keeping it in a platform that is secure for the environment that you work in, that's a challenge that keeps Neil and Bill very busy, keeps me busy. But it is exciting to see the glee in people's eyes of, okay, this made my job more fun. And that's, I think, something that is going to be at the desk is easy for us to see today. But also in the gears, in the operation, everywhere, even in operating of a crane, you're going to start seeing a bit of glee come to people's eyes and how it takes the suck out of your day-to-day job.
Can I pivot off of something he said
Yeah,
there?
happy to. And I'll give one example myself after Neil's pivoted, and then we'll open it up to some questions. But over to you, Neil.
Sure. Yeah. So the research shows the state government is just now authorized to have the desktop AI that we can meet certain compliance standards, FedRAMP and whatever else there. But the research shows over the last couple of years, if you buy a person a desktop license, whether it be ChatGPT or Copilot or one of the other ones that are out there, and you just plop it on their desk, 25% of the people will consume it, use it, and take advantage of it. Another 65% will try it, dabble with it, and go back to their old habits. They might use it for helping me as a search engine instead of something else. So that's an adoption problem. That's the good news. You can do this. I mean, this is all of a sudden in your power to say, I want to adopt AI. This is now not an infrastructure problem. This is not a technology problem. This is a training problem for my employees. This is a behavior problem. You should be excited about that because now it's empowering. It's now in your court that I can now improve my workforce, make my workforce a lot more efficient if I give them the right training on how to use this tool. The benefit is there. The 25% have proven it. Right? But to give people find those use cases, say, if you use it this way, give the people training, a certain amount of training, and how to do it and have them try it, then you will now be materially changing the efficiency of your workforce.
Yeah, I agree, and I think I'll give an example for myself. So my team, we have a weekly staff meeting, and one of them is pursuing their PhD. As well as an employee. And they highlighted something that I hadn't heard about. I'd heard about the Google Geminis and the Google AI Studio and the Google tools, but then they highlighted notebooklm.google. So I was like, oh, it's cool. It's really helping me summarize and review articles that I have to read for my PhD thesis work. I'm like, okay. So I loaded it up, loaded in some files, and the next morning, because I loaded quite a few in, I listened to what it had developed over my breakfast, and I was blown away of what it could do. So I gave it a scientific publication I'd written about a volcanic eruption in 2006 at Mount Augustine volcano. I gave it the open source USGS paper, the PDF I wrote, loaded it in, and then I asked it to generate a podcast automatically of two people conversing about the paper I'd given it. And it sounded like myself and a research scientist talking about the paper as if we'd read it and could informationally describe what was happening.
But it sounds fun, like a morning radio show.
It was like,
right?
oh, this is cool. It's a paper about this volcano. What is it? Augustine. Oh, right. So where's that? Alaska. Oh, wow, that's a cold place. But it erupted. What happened? And I'm like, what? They're describing it like two science communication experts. So I did it again I have to write and look for federal grants. My group is completely funded by federal grants. So I took a openly available request for proposals from a funding agency, 45-page document. I would normally go through and read it, pull out the important topics, know what I need to have in my different sections. I will still do that, but I dropped it in, and it gave me a 10-minute podcast on what is this proposal. It needs to be improved because it said, oh, what's this document we're reading? NSF521.pdf. So it didn't read the information of the title of the document, it read the name of the file. But it said, oh, what's this about? Oh, they're developing this really cool opportunity for material innovation. Oh, what's the funding amount? You can even interact with it and ask it questions, just like it calling into the podcast. I then took my organization's websites, and which we have that describes all of our programs. I dropped those in to see if somebody was reading our website, what would they talk about based on what we'd written? So are we describing ourselves to the people that we want to work with, that we want to support? And we're doing a pretty good job, because it then had 2 people saying, hey, I've just heard about this funding opportunity that Center ICE has. Oh, what's the program? Oh, it's the I-Corps program. What does it do? Oh, it helps customer discovery. What businesses could be involved in doing this? So am I describing my programming to my beneficiaries, to my end users? Okay, maybe I need to tweak components of my website. But it's doing it rather than me thinking what people are going to interpret about what I'm describing. It's actually telling me that the text is how, through this LLM, what 2 people would potentially think about when they read my webpage. So it's helping me to optimize how I describe my programming. It's helping me to optimize how I might prepare to propose to a funding. It's not going to help me write the whole thing. I'm going to do that myself. And it's helping me digest information. I even took my, I teach an academic class. I took my audio from my Zoom presentation and loaded that transcript in, and it then described to me, if somebody had missed my class, what the class was talking about. So it's giving people time optimization to focus on what we can do as human and be able to digest lots of information to then be able to make informed decisions about what to do next. So that's just 3 examples that I've worked on in the last 2 weeks because somebody showed me that a cool tool that was out there. I became part of that 25%. My team became part of that 75%. They're now thinking, how could I try this? How could I play with this? How could I use this to optimize what I do for my work? So that's just, wanted to share that as an example from myself.
What a great way to confirm that the documentation on your website is up to date.
Yeah.
We are learning that. You pointed at it, you ask it questions, it gives you an accurate answer, but the information needs to be updated. Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with the AI. It did exactly what you asked it, but not what you wanted.
Yeah. So
before we go to questions, can I add one more thing?
Yeah, please go ahead. We've got about 10 minutes for questions, so over to you, Steve,
Okay,
last from the panel.
So I agree with everything we just heard, which is AI is great to take the suck out of your job. It is great to help you be more productive, more efficient, more effective, perhaps more creative, more intuitive, all the things sort of elevate us. And I've used Notebook LM, and it's magical. If you haven't tried it, notebooklm.google, you should try it. You should all try it. But I would say that AI can take us another place as well, which is it can take us to somewhere we couldn't get to without it. So the example I'll give you, when I was working at Google DeepMind, yesterday in the keynote, I said that AI could save the life of someone in this room. And I meant it. Because by understanding how proteins fold, proteins are the workhorses in your body. About 20,000 different proteins in the human body. The same way if you look at a machine and see the structure of a machine, you can understand roughly what it does. The same thing with proteins. So there are 200 million or so known proteins. And understanding the structure of them had been elusive to scientists. It takes about 5 years for one PhD student to figure out, through a process of crystallography and other experimentation, to figure out the structure of one protein. DeepMind built an AI that was able to crunch through in about 2.5 month period all 200 million known proteins and accurately predict the structure of every single one of them. It will accelerate medical science by 10 or 20 or 30 years. They were able to do 1 billion years worth of PhD work in 2.5 months. So AI, as well as accelerating, taking the suck out of things, can also help us do impossible things that we couldn't do without it. That's the other vector to consider when you're thinking about AI is, what breakthrough things could it let me and my business do?
I just want to say that there's a PhD student that felt that took the suck out of their PhD work.
Yeah,
Yes.
They're not mutually exclusive, I agree.
And I wish when I was doing my PhD 20 plus years ago that some of that was taken out of my life.
That's my thing, is stay modern, because what he's describing, wait till quantum computing now runs AI, and you'll go from 20,000 years down to 2 years, down to 2 minutes.
Yeah. So we've got about just under 10 minutes for questions. Please go to the mic. Please say your name, your organization, and then your question, because it then provides context of where it's coming from. So Tyson, as I know who's there first, over to you.
Okay, hi, I'm Tyson Swetnam. I'm a research professor at University of Arizona, and I run a large cyber infrastructure project. Steve, you actually answered half of the question I wanted you to answer just now when you mentioned AlphaFold. So this conference, we focused a lot on generative AI. We haven't talked a lot about predictive AI. I've been thinking about the new climate prediction models that Google has developed. How do you see the relationship of more classical predictive AI and generative AI coming together?
If we want to build really sophisticated AIs, they're not going to be just by scaling up large language models. I think we've discovered this in the last 6 to 12 months, which is you need to build reasoning capabilities on the top. That uses a lot of reinforcement learning to build reasoning trees. When I was at DeepMind, there was a big debate over, there were three big paths that you could follow to try and follow AGI, and which one was the right one to bet on. The answer was all of them. We're going to need to combine all of these techniques to build a sophisticated intelligence which is human level and able to do, as defined by all the things that a human can do. So I think you're already seeing reinforcement learning come together with large language models. I think there's still going to be more algorithmic breakthroughs required to get us to human-level intelligence. We're not there yet. We can't just take the things we've already got and combine them in interesting ways. But I don't think it's many more.
In that particular field, also the ability I think is extremely innovative is now that you're building multiple AI systems, and one of the AI systems is actually creating different models for the first one to test out. Even in transportation, it was that in autonomous transportation, they would drive these different streets, and then they would go back, and the AI would attempt to learn those streets. But now they're creating digital twins of the world, and then they're adding chaos to that digital twin. And so in the world of predictive models, I think the ability for one AI engine to add chaos and another one to then run these scenarios against it is the AI is actually beginning to completely improve its own predictability.
Right.
Like a generative adversarial network, yeah.
So I have been informed that we can have one more question, so I do apologize for everybody that stood up. I've realized that we are needing to move to our next session and start our next session at 10:15. So one more question, and then we'll go from there.
Hi, my name is Parrish. I work with the Economic Research Group with the state of Alaska. My question is specific to data centers. This strategy is only viable if the state is able to compete competitively with other states in the US. One of the biggest struggles that Alaska faces right now is the cost of power. How does Alaska compete in attracting data center investment for AI strategies if our cost of power is so much greater than competing states?
So when we're looking at the cost of powers, let's also look at the geography of Alaska, is that cost of power in many parts of Alaska is extremely high. But then we also have very large pockets of stranded power. And when I talk about stranded power, is that if you look at Cordova, is that they look at how they have excess capacity. So if we're going to look at mega data centers, and that's all you're chasing, then maybe you're not going to find your gigawatts. But if you're looking at pockets of power in the 10 megawatt or the 20 megawatt across Alaska, and then you think about the geography of Alaska, is that a data center does not need to be, we're seeing the model change even with Microsoft. A data center is not necessarily a farm of buildings. It is a collection of facilities across a region now. And those regions represent one cloud or one regional center. Azure uses the terminology, Amazon uses the terminology. And so I think rethinking also the idea of one single large data center and the cost of power at that, when we're looking at where we have excess power across Alaska, that's where the potential is for building out. And then what also the benefit to us is that we're now shrinking down that response time to whatever we're using for large language models, forestry models, weather models. We're shrinking that down, and even in defense, the ability to put processing close to defensive technologies, that's going to be an improvement. So I would say the challenge is finding those stranded energy, and we do have that across Alaska. And we have energy that's not in use. It especially up on the North Slope. When you look at the byproduct of gas from the current oil industry, that gas is not coming to market down here yet. So then you have the potential of a data center up there operating at just a fraction of the cost. But you also are going to weigh that challenge with the energy green energy is much more attractive to the larger providers. But to the small to medium providers, they're looking for energy in general. So Alaska does have potential. It's just not looking at necessarily from the mega center solely. There's potential there, but it's also looking at the small to medium size.
Yeah, I would think of the on-the-edge data centers rather than the big house, large data centers. Neil, I see you got the mic up. Do you want to have the last response to that question before I pass over to our hosts?
I say don't wait. It's easier to bring today. It's easier to bring your data to the AI rather than wait to build the AI where your data is. So always have a short-term, long-term plan. Short-term, move your data to the AI and start taking advantage of that today, and then work on the longer-term problem to bring data centers and stuff into the state. The problem is not the lack of energy. The problem is the lack of harnessed energy. There's lots of energy sources in Alaska. We have to harness it, and that's where the cost goes up. And so I think that's where our opportunity is, figuring out how to harness that energy. I mean, we've got thermal, tidal, everything, solar, a bunch of stuff out there. The problem is not the lack of energy. It's harnessing it.
Great. And so that wraps up our panel. Thank you for the questions. Thank you to my panelists here, Neil Smith, Leonard Robertson, and Steve Brown. Carla is on the stage, which is her way of telling me to stop. It's the hook to pull the panel off. And I'll let her introduce what's coming up in our deep dives. But thank you all for your attention. Thank you to our panelists. And Carla, the mic is yours.